All right, thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about automating your business process, and your host today will be Colin Tubner, who's the Director of Customer Solutions, and myself, my name is Aaron Brennan. I'm the Director of Product Marketing. So when we start talking about, automating business processes, what we're really talking about is automating the tasks that people need to do in order to make them more efficient in their everyday job. So if we look at this graph, we can see that the current workday, a majority of employees are actually spending their time doing paperwork and data entry and spending very little time actually working with clients. And we know from research that more engagement with clients actually builds a better reputation, it closes sales faster, and as well as retains customers for a longer period of time. So the goal with automating the business process is to actually move your employees away from doing that manual paperwork and data entry and running around trying to engage with people internally within the organization and spend more time with their focus on their client and making sure that their client is happy and getting what they need to actually improve the business and organization. So what does an employee want to do rather than manual data entry, sending emails back and forth to managers internally, trying to solve problems or make sure that information is being input correctly or letting people know what's happening? They really want to be experts in their job. They want to be the person that they talk to, that everybody comes to in order to find out what's going on and find out more information, or spend their time working on more edge case scenarios that don't fall into the mainstream business process. So by focusing our time and energy on making these employees do these tasks that take up a lot of time, by switching back and forth between different systems of record or different user interfaces, we're actually preventing them from actually giving the support that they need to the client. So what happens here is, in order to build a business process, you need multiple different tools that need to come together, and either that takes many months to put them together and actually grow the system to actually be able to talk to each other, which costs you time and money. You also have the functionality of these employees having to jump in and out of different systems, understanding different UI and contextually changing all the time, misinformation of data moving back and forth between these systems to build out a workflow process. So in our world, we look at business process of having 6 key components of e-signature, some robotic process automation, being able to submit surveys or HTML forms, business process management, contract negotiation, and document generation. These tools by themselves coming together create a full business solution that automates the process for your end client as well as for your internal employees to give them more time, to give the clients more success, and let everybody know what's going on. In order to build this sort of process, it really takes two different layers, and there's two distinct layers. The first one is the creative layer. The creative layer is, how do you kick off this process? What is the creative way that you get information from the customer or your client, or internally for that matter, to start the business process? So do you need an address? Do you need a social security number? Do you need a credit card number? Any of these sorts of things that you can, in a creative way, get from at the start of the process to kick it off. And we can do that in a series of different ways within AirSlate, through forms or surveys, document generation, contracts, and spreadsheets. The second piece of this is really what we call the data movement layer. The data movement layer is really around, once you collect that information, then what do you do with it? And this is where a lot of employees internally spend their time, is once they collect the data, they're either manually changing it to a CRM, or they're emailing a manager to approve whatever was sent to them, or they're running to the finance team to get more information about whatever information they collected. This data should be automated, so then that way the bulk of the employee's time is not running around trying to manage these processes manually, but actually automatically doing it. So in a typical workflow, let's say we're dealing with an HR onboarding. If a customer, if the HR employee sends out the form to be filled out by the client and gets it back, that HR manager then needs to email it off to the manager, touch base with the manager, answer any questions that the customer might have, run off to finance, get the agreement on the final purchase price, the final purchase prices, or in this case, the HR's salary requirements and options packages that go along with it. And you can see that this really turns into a struggle because a lot of this is not visible and you can't see what's happening, as well as takes a lot of time that you're not spending on the client, letting them know what's happening. What employees really want to do is they want to work in a way that's really efficient, that they have visibility into, and should really be a streamlined process of automation that happens. So once they get the information back, it can be automatically sent off to the necessary people internally at the organization to make actions on those items, and they can spend their time on the front-facing client. So this brings us to what is AirSlate. AirSlate is an all-in-one workflow and business processing solution that helps automate tasks that these employees need to do on a day-to-day basis. We can do either simple to advanced collaboration internally. This has an easy documentation workflow, so you can build the document and automate where that document goes, whether that's to a CRM system or internally to another client or to an external client, letting them know what is happening in the next steps. And finally, there's advanced reporting and tracking that allows us to actually see how this process is working. Is it efficient enough? And test it against these other options that you might have in order to figure out what's actually going on. So I will pass this over to Colin, and Colin's going to give you a quick demo of how this actually works and how how automating the solution can free up time for the employee or the organization to spend more time with clients to get better business value.
Thanks, Aaron. As you can see from the slide, we're going to show just a simplified version of employee onboarding. In the interest of time, we won't build out the entire thing. A real employee onboarding process, which we've all been through at one point or another, has a number of different forms that go off to different government agencies and health insurers and internal departments. And there's a number of different systems that have to be updated as well. So we're going to distill that down to the process for just a single form, but it should show you how an entire employee onboarding process could be built using AirSlate with many different forms and many different systems. So we'll have a manager fill out a web form with the employee's basic information. Then we'll have a bot automatically fill out an IRS form for the employee. The employee just needs to look at the form and sign it. And then we'll also have a bot populate Google Sheets. And here we're using Google Sheets as kind of an easy stand-in for one of your enterprise systems that might include employee information. So I'll go ahead and share here. And so we're in the AirSlate workspace, and just two brief terms that I'll define before moving on. We have the idea of a flow. And if you've looked at any workflow systems, you're probably familiar with this idea of a flow, which is the set of steps that your workflow is going to follow every time it's kicked off. And then we also have the concept of a slate, and a slate is the package of documents that will follow down the flow. So each time you start the flow, you will get a new slate, and the slate will follow all the steps in the flow. We do have a library of flows, but in the interest of kind of showing off the system, I'm going to create a new flow from scratch instead. So here's where we set up the template for the flow, and this is where I define all of the documents that make up the flow. Again, when you kick off the flow, you'll get your own copy of each of these documents, which is what we call a slate. And we're just going to have two documents in the sample flow. So one will be this form or survey, and that's going to be for the manager to fill out the employee's name and email address. Then we'll also add the IRS W-4 form, which is a PDF. So I'll go ahead and create the web form first. And so all we need on here is the employee's name and their email address. And so I'll make these half page just to have a little bit of a cleaner layout. Go ahead and say first name, last name, and email, and then just some instructions. Enter employee information. And then I do want to name these fields something useful so we can refer to them later. Okay, and that's really it. Our form editor does support many different kinds of elements and widgets that can be placed on the form. We also support having conditional logic so that maybe fields will show and hide depending on some values that are here. So we don't have to get into all of that in this brief intro demo, but the form designer does allow you to get quite complex. So just name that document appropriately. And then I'll go ahead and say, we're going to add another document. And so I'm going to add this PDF. And this is where we will actually take this PDF. And since it's a government created form, it's already got defined fields on it. You can see here it says 27 fillable fields. So AirSlate found and created those fields for us. When you get more advanced with AirSlate, we can also generate documents from scratch from a Word document. And we can also work with contracts or spreadsheets directly in the tool to do negotiations or calculations on data. So here, I'm really just going to name these two fields, first name and last name, not use the IRS code names that they have. And we're going to add a signature. You can also edit the document directly in here using our PDF editing capabilities. So if I wanted to highlight something, remove something, add text, I can do that. But we're just going to add a signature here. So here's my signature. Just drop that on. And of course, it's going to be required. That's really all I need to do there. So that's it for the documents. We'll move on to the workflow. And as I mentioned earlier, there's just two steps in this workflow. There will be the manager who enters the employee name, and then there will be the employee who looks at the PDF form. Okay, so the manager, they're going to enter the employee name, as I said. They actually don't need to look at this PDF at all, so we'll hide it from them. And on the employee name, they're just going to do all three fields. And then we're going to revoke access when this slate is completed. Maybe we don't want the manager to be able to see the employee's social security number when it's entered on the W-4 form. So we can say they're not going to have access to this after they work with it. All right, and then we'll just add one more step. You can also drag the step on here, or you can click that little plus sign. And so we'll call this one employee. And they don't need to see the HTML form. It's already been filled out for them. And so that'll just be hidden. But they do see the W-4, and they'll need to at least sign it. We don't need to revoke their access. And then while the manager, that's going to be kicked off by the manager clicking a link. We'll see that a little bit later. So we don't need to predefine who the manager is. It's going to be whoever starts the process. But the manager is going to enter the employee's email, and then that email will be used to assign this slate to a person at the second step. So we know that email, we got it on the first form, and we're going to use that here. So I'm able to, when I'm saying who is the email that will get this, I can use the values that were entered on a document to send that out. You can also customize the email. So I'll just call this demo, just so we can see that the customization comes across. And that's really all we need to do there. And then finally, bots. So my original diagram showed two bots. There's one bot that copies the name from the form the manager fills out onto the PDF that the employee fills out. And then there will be another one that takes that name and email and puts it in a Google spreadsheet, just to represent the idea that in reality, we would take this employee's information and put it into some of our systems of record. So I'll set both of those up here. They're both some of our most popular bots. So here's the pre-filled document bot. And this simply copies data from one of our documents to another, however you like to set it up. So pretty simple. It's from the enter employee name. We need the first name and last name. And then it's to the W-4. Because I gave them the same names, AirSlate just matches those for me automatically. Now, under conditions, every bot has this concept of when should this bot actually do its work. We're going to make sure that the employee name has actually been filled out at this point. So just those two fields are not empty. That's all we need to do. And that should be good to go. Then I'm also going to export to Google Sheet. We're going to take the user's name and email and put those in a Google Sheet. Just briefly show you the Google Sheet here. So it's just a simple sheet that has first name, last name, and email as columns. AirSlate's able to connect to my Google account, which I've already set up, and then select a spreadsheet. So I have name collection. And so we're just going to transfer a single line of data, but if we actually had created a table or something like that, we could transfer multiple lines. And then we'll say whatever is on the enter employee name sheet, the first name, last name, and email. It matched email automatically. I do need to manually match the first name and last name. And so that's our mapping. And then this one, I'm going to wait until the employee has signed the W-4 before copying it. So we're going to say the condition for the bot to execute will be FW4 when the signature is signed. And that's it. So when I hit done, AirSlate's going to show me the options for starting this flow. I mentioned earlier that I want the manager to click a link. And so the way these links work is that every time you open the link, you get a new slate under that flow. So I'll copy that. And I'm going to open this in an incognito window just so we don't confuse AirSlate about my permissions. So this is a manager in my business kicking off the employee onboarding. They need to agree to the terms and conditions before they can start. And then once this loads, they'll be able to just enter the name and email. Right, well, go ahead and hit complete there. So that'll save and it should send it to the employee over here in my demo folder. I should get this email momentarily. I should close that down. And we'll open up this in an incognito window as well. There's my edited subject. So customized subject, the body is customizable as well. And we'll go ahead and say open the incognito window. So you can see my name was copied by the bot from the first form onto this PDF for me. All I've got to do is sign and hit complete. And then we can look at the spreadsheet and watch that name come in from the bot in just a moment. There it is. And then, of course, you can also download the PDF that's signed, and there's a certificate of completion as well. But that's really meant to just give you a quick overview of how you can automate document operations and the integrations to other tools with the data on your documents in just a few minutes with AirSlate. So I'll hand it back over to Aaron at this point to wrap us up.
Thanks, Colin. So as you can see from the demo that was just shown, really by automating this whole system, we are reducing the errors that could happen from manual movement of data between systems of record. So as data comes in from AirSlate, moving it into something like Salesforce or Google or Microsoft Dynamics or anything like that, we reduce the errors of manually switching that data over by automatically pushing it to that system of record. We increase the efficiency across the organization. We decrease the amount of time that employees need to actually manually run around and get everybody together, because all that stuff is automated while it goes through. So that from here, the employee can actually spend more time with the client, giving better customer service, leading to higher wins in sales cycles or wins in whatever the business process is, as well as decreasing the amount of time that they have to run around and figure out what's going on within the rest of the organization in order to get a process finished. So the benefits here that everyone will ultimately see is increases in employee efficiency, and decreases in mistakes across the organization. So this is the last slide of the deck, and I just want to tell you that if you have any more questions around AirSlate, you should really check out our academy. Just go to www.airslate.com/academy. All the courses are free. You can learn how to build your own process automation through AirSlate, as well as a range of different topics on just sort of what is automation, how does automation work, how to use it for yourself. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to support, and that is just support@airslate.com. And they will be happy to help you set up any of your flows or business process or tasks that you want to automate in the future. Thanks so much for joining.